Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, the Toronto Raptors have been playing on a huge roll right now. I believe we're on a 6-game winning streak, and this has all come off the backs of a depleted Toronto Raptors team. Kyle Lowry has been out, Serge Ibaka has been out. We have a few deeper bench guys like Matt Thomas, Patrick McCaw. They've been injured, but it's looking like next game. Nick Nurse has hinted at next game is the target, but if it's not next game, definitely this week, Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka shall return to the lineup, and there are some tough decisions to be made for the Toronto Raptors in terms of rotations going forward, because we were running a 7-man essentially rotation before all the injuries happened. We had the revitalization of the bench mob. It was Kyle Lowry, Fred, Norm, Serge, Pascal, OG, Marc Gasol, and who am I forgetting? We had essentially
Hollis Jefferson, man.
Yeah, Hollis Jefferson wasn't even in the lineup. We had 7 guys rocking, but then once the injuries happened, Rondé, Terrence Davis, and Chris Boucher came into the lineup and really made their imprint, shown that they're rotation players for this team. But we brought up not having huge rotations is sometimes a positive for this team, but right now we have 10 guys that are deserving of minutes. And what are the Raptors going to do when Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka come back to keep this flow going?
It's tough to say, because on this past, if we're talking about Norman Powell being a big guy here, that he's going to get pushed back to the bench, and we've seen his productivity over the past games where he's being a starter. It's by far his most efficient or his most productive season to date as a Toronto Raptor, and the past 6 to 8 game stretch he's had 26-point games, 17, 15, 20, a 33 last night. So I think Norm is going to take the brunt of this lineup change in terms of what he's been able to do. We've never seen him be amazing off of the bench. He's had flashes, but the most consistent streak now that he's had, again, as a Toronto Raptor, has been coming as a starter. But we're obviously not going to throw Kyle Lowry off the bench, so it's going to be difficult. So I'm not sure what we're going to see here moving forward.
Yeah, certainly. And this kind of brings up the debate that we had at the beginning of the season, because Norman Powell, he has struggled off the bench in his career. When he gets those starter-type minutes, and he usually comes in the playoffs, that's probably why the playoff Norm meme is so big, because Norm plays his best when he's getting that consistent run, and especially with Dwayne Case, it only really came in the playoffs. But through this stretch of games, Norm's known he's going to start. He started 10 games this year, and mostly coming off through the stretch. Do you think Norman Powell can bring this consistency off the bench now that he's had these stretch of games, or should Nick Nurse look to, bringing back to the debate at the beginning of the year, look to maybe bring Fred VanVleet back off the bench, because we know he plays very well, coming off, he's been a 6-man his whole career with the Toronto Raptors and has shown he can be productive, unlike Norm.
I don't know, it's hard, because if we go back to what the initial starting lineup was, where we have Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, OG, Pascal, and Gasol. Now we have a heavy 5-man rotation, 5 and 5 coming off the bench, where we'll have Norman Powell, Terrence Davis, Rondé Hollis Jefferson, Serge Ibaka, and Chris Boucher. And we all know that playing a 10-man rotation is not the best way to secure wins in the NBA. 8 seems to be the key number. It's not to say that it can't be done, but when you start distributing minutes so that everybody's down in the 15 in the under 20 minute per game range, you're just not allowing people to have enough time to heat up, to get enough shot attempts to really maximize their efficiency. So I think we're going to have to see somebody get phased out, that or we're going to play a 10-man rotation all season long until people get injured, which does inevitably happen. Fortunately, guys like Patrick McCaw and Matt Thomas, they've never actually been integrated as a key piece in the Toronto Raptors lineup. So I am interested to see now. Specifically, I don't want to see Fred come off the bench, and that was your point? No, because he has asserted himself as a starter in the NBA, and it's been not a 0 to 100. It hasn't been a definite jump that he's made to say, okay, this guy is going to be a starter night in and night out. But I think what he's proven over this season is that he does deserve to be a starter and not come off the bench. So I don't suspect, or I don't think that it's the most beneficial for this team if we now put him back on the bench.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you there. Fred VanVleet, he's averaging 19 and 7 this season. He's putting up two steals as well. He's shown that he can man the point guard and the shooting guard with Kyle Lowry and Fred out there. So it's Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't think Fred should be coming off the bench. And another thing I've seen people talk about, because OG Anunoby is also a player that is completely 180 his game, not 360, because then he'd be in the same direction, but has played completely different from last season. He stepped up his game to a new level. Do you think Norman Powell possibly starting at the small forward, maybe a move, and bringing OG off the bench? It's something I'm less keen on, as that's his natural position. But
OG has better size. OG is one of the best three-point shooters per percentage in the NBA this season.
Yep.
He has made really leaps and bounds, and his ability to defend players is invaluable, especially when we have a lot of size misadvantages or disadvantages when we're playing against bigger teams.
Yep.
So I don't think we'd want to sacrifice that three position and a potential rebounder. Not that Norm doesn't hustle, but obviously the size and the length of OG is way more substantial. What I see happening, and what I think the most obvious play out of what's going to happen once we integrate Kyle and Serge back into the lineup is, one, you could make the argument that maybe a trade will happen, or maybe we're going to want to dump a guy, and I think Serge Ibaka would be a player that maybe we would look at, but I think he is invaluable for his rebounding. He has a fantastic mid-range jump shot game. He's done a lot of good things for the Toronto Raptors. So he's going to get his minutes. He's going to come off the bench. I think Chris Boucher is therefore going to lose out on his time. He's gonna be most significantly affected, and then I think Norman Powell is gonna come off the bench, and it's gonna reduce his efficiency. You're not gonna see him get as many points, and then we're gonna have the same question marks that we've had every time we've doubted Norman Powell, because he's not getting enough run and not enough time out there to make an impact, or he goes out there and starts playing wild and taking sort of inefficient shots just because he wants to get his points up that he was used to having over the past stretch of games. So I see those two guys being the two that we sort of phase out as we stick maybe to an 8-man rotation.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think Norman Powell's certainly going to get his minutes. Nick Nurse knows to keep him on the floor at least, because even when he was coming off the bench at the beginning of the year, it looked like he was playing better than he had in past seasons off the bench. But yeah, the key for the most optimal outcome for the Toronto Raptors, I think, is Norman Powell can continue this production in the same amount of minutes, because I think it's possible for Norm to maintain this 28 to 30 minutes a night, being our number one six-man, him and Serge coming off the bench, as it was at the beginning of the year, but have this level of consistency.
There, buddy. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson is our number one guy coming off the bench. Norm can be number two. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson is by far the number one guy right now.
That's a fair argument, but we're going to talk about Rondé and the three new guys specifically after. But you brought up Chris Boucher, Riker, and the Toronto Raptors fans. He's won us over on the podcast, and he is undersized for center. But now Serge Ibaka can play that center role. Boucher can probably play his more natural position at the power forward. He's kind of tapered off the last couple games. What would you rather see in the regular season? Because the Toronto Raptors have shown they can win in the regular season with a 10-man rotation. Remember 2 seasons ago when we had the original bench mob? We ran Jakob Poeltl, Pascal, CJ Miles, DeLon Wright, and Fred VanVleet. That whole year, they all got consistent minutes coming off the bench. I believe it was the Raptors' best regular season record in the franchise history. I think it's possible that during the regular season we're going to see these lineups, more dispersed minutes and all that sort of stuff happening. Boucher running the power forward, and you brought up how you think that it's possibly going to be an 8-man, 9-man rotation where Boucher takes the cut of minutes, and Norman Powell might take a regression back in terms of minutes. But I see the Toronto Raptors still playing these guys out, and yes, it might take a hit because we're playing at such a high level right now with having 8 guys on the court, 8 or 9 players. But I think Chris Boucher, obviously Rondé's not going to lose his minutes. Obviously Terrence Davis is not going to lose their minutes, and Norman Powell isn't, and Serge Ibaka deserves them. And Chris Boucher is playing at a level like you can't not give these guys minutes. And Patrick McCaw and Matt Thomas, I think, are the obvious people that are not going to get run when they come back from injury. But I'm an advocate for this 10-man rotation during the regular season. Then when the playoffs come, maybe stripping it back.
And here's another point, maybe, is let's say we want to reduce our guards coming off the bench because we want to give enough time for Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry, because I don't agree that 10-man, because you only have 48 minutes in a game. If you're playing 10-man rotation, then somebody is getting significant reduction, right? They're going to be playing in that 10 to 20-minute range, and I don't think that is an ideal amount of time for an NBA player to get warmed up, get a few shot attempts. You're not going to get subbed in and be the instant number one offense guy for the most part. Terrence Davis has done a good job in coming off the bench and getting his shots up. But Ben, consider this. If you can only play one, are you going to play Norman Powell or Terrence Davis?
If I could
The answer is probably Norman Powell, right?
If I could
He's
only
been
play
playing
one, at all, that
if you had to play an 8-man rotation and the choice was down between Norman Powell and Terrence Davis.
That Norman Powell's been really, really good these past
He's been
few
really
games,
fantastic.
But Terrence Davis, I think, does more. I don't think he scores at the level of Norm.
Wow, this is a huge. This is
tough
for Team Norm. This is a huge shift in your attitude.
No,
towards
I'm not saying
Powell here, Mister.
I'm not saying I'm really high on Terrence Davis right now, and I think his potential. Because Norman Powell has shown he has the intangibles to be a remarkable scorer in this league, athlete, defender, and shoot. Why do you gotta do this? This is why I'm saying it's a 10-man rotation. Run these boys, throughout the course of the year. And Kyle Lowry, he needs to have reduced minutes, I think, because we saw him. He already got injured this season. He was playing 36 minutes per game, one of the top minute per game players in the league. If we can reduce him to maybe 30, so he manages his body, he's fine. Give Terrence Davis those backup point guard role. Norman Powell. We could do load management in terms of depth with this roster. I think it's a fair thing to say that we could run this lineup.
That's fair, and also, it's a perfect statement to make. And I think that had Kyle Lowry not been the only reason that we hung around in that Milwaukee game, that we would have got absolutely demolished by had he not had a lot of heroics in that game. I would have even said, we can really reduce his minutes, because I think that at the level that the Raptors are playing right now, it'd be better served to not have him be a significant piece in that, to not let the offense flow through him or be dictated by Kyle Lowry, because I feel like it's different. It seems like a breath of fresh air in this Toronto Raptors team. Not that we've been stagnant before. It's just, to me, these players that we have over the past 10 games, or however long it's been since Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka have been in the lineup, just seem so different than any other team that we see in the league in terms of their defensive sets and the quickness that they play on offense. And Kyle Lowry, I don't know how well suited he is for that. But again, the caveat being, he was the only reason that we stuck around in our most difficult matchup yet this season against the Milwaukee Bucks. So he obviously still has a lot to give to this Toronto Raptors team. But I agree, we could maybe give him only 25 minutes per game, make sure that to try to limit his potential of getting injured, and then also give more time to the bench guys.
I see where you're coming from in saying that the team does look different when Fred VanVleet's manning the point guard and Kyle Lowry's out, and we've had success with that. Obviously, we're on a 6-game win streak right now. We haven't played the toppest of tier competition these 6 games, but the Raptors have played really well, even against good teams without our 2 main guys and Kyle Lowry and Serge Ibaka. But my point, Kyle Lowry's averaging 22 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds so far this season. That might not be sustainable, but he's certainly showing he can get close to those numbers consistently throughout the year, and we're going to need those in the playoffs when we're going up against the Bucks, going up against the Sixers, going up against whoever we end up playing. And we can't have him injured. My point in reducing his minutes is still run the offense through when he's out there, still keep him in the flow of the season and all that, but let's not get into the 2016 Kyle Lowry, 2015 Kyle Lowry, where we play him 40 minutes a night in games that we need to win, and then he's injured. He just ends up inevitably, because he has such a load on him, which we did see a little bit at the beginning of the season.
That was that's the beginning of the season, Kyle Lowry, and the reason was, it's pretty clear, because the pressure of being defending champions and having Kawhi Leonard and that big question mark of who's going to step up. I think that we wanted to come out strong and thought that Kyle Lowry was the only guy that we could really rely on. Then with his injury, now we've sort of realized the potential that this completely different team has. But I think it's right. I think you're absolutely right that we don't need to reduce his minutes because he can't play on this team, but because we need him for the playoffs. When the game slows down, which it always does, when the rotations get tighter, and when you need a guy late game to make those big shots, Kyle Lowry is all of those things.
Certainly. So to sum it all up, I'm saying the Toronto Raptors run a 10-man rotation with the original 7 with Rondé, obviously, and Terrence Davis can't get their minutes reduced, and keep Boucher into the rotation. He's shown that he deserves rotation minutes. Ryker, you're Nick Nurse. What do you do in these next stretch of games, with assuming everyone's healthy?
Well, I wouldn't be a good Nick Nurse, Ben, because that man, he's like an advanced chess player out there with the rotations, and I've stated it time and time again, I hate going beyond an 8-man rotation. It's not for me. Last season I had big criticisms about it, but it's working. Every time he does something different, so I'm probably going to have to agree with you, even though it's against my fundamental nature as a basketball player, analyst, coach, whatever, to go into the deep bench like that to play 10-man. But if it can work, then it's definitely better than sitting guys that have great potential, right?
Yeah, certainly. It's a tough decision for Nurse to have, see who gets minutes and all that. But let us know what you guys think. Well, what do you guys think Nick Nurse should do with these new added pieces we're integrating back into this amazing team? Let us know in the comment section below. You're the best to make this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Ryker, any last words?
Utah next, Ben. Now we're finally getting into it.
Yeah.
Cheers.